Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1975 anthology film Trilogy of Terror, and as the title says, there are 3 stories in this trilogy, because that's how trilogies work. Now this one is dedicated to Frank Rolkowski, who's the person who requested this, and is a coworker of mine, and my apologies because I told him many months ago that I would do a review for this, but, you know, I've said in my reviews before, I get sidetracked. Like, I have films I'm going to do, and then I see something else, and I get distracted. I just walk right over there. I'm like a kid in a shop, and you're just like, stay with mommy, and then they see something, just wander off. That's how I am with movies. So anyway, here we go. Directed by Dan Curtis, who also directed a bunch of episodes of Dark Shadows, The Night Strangler, The Norless Tapes, Scream of the Wolf, Dead of Night, The Turn of the Screw, which was a TV version, and Burnt Offerings, which if you haven't seen Burnt Offerings, definitely check out that film. Very good film. Very good acting, very good writing, directing, everything. Actually, I have a review for it on my channel. So if you've already seen it, you can check out my review. If you haven't, I highly recommend. This one was written by Richard Matheson, who also wrote scripts for House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Raven, did some writing for the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, the original Twilight Zone, The Last Man on Earth, yes, the original one, The Legend of Hell House, and Jaws 3D. I had to throw Jaws 3D in there. It's not, like, great, but, you know. Also involved in writing some of these was William F. Nolan, who also wrote scripts for The Norless Tapes, The Turn of the Screw, and Burnt Offerings. So you see, he worked with Dan Curtis a decent amount there. Please note in this film that Karen Black plays all of the main female characters. She's been in stuff that you might know, Burnt Offerings, with Dan Curtis again, It's Alive 3, Island of the Alive, and maybe most well-known recently for her turn as Mother Firefly in Rob Zombie's Firefly trilogy, which is House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and 3 from Hell, which I'm not really a fan of, but I will say I've seen them all, and Karen Black did an excellent job, like she does in this, and especially in Burnt Offerings. Gonna plug that one again. Also, if you look her up on IMDb, she has 205 acting credits, so did a lot of work. So apparently when this film was going to air in Brazil, censorship ended up cutting the 3rd story out because it was apparently too scary for TV, so they had to cut it out to put it on TV. So obviously it can't still be called Trilogy of Terror, so it was just called 2 Horror Stories. There you go. But they did a disservice to the Brazilian populace because the 3rd story is by far the best story. And I believe when Frank was asking me to review this, I remember him saying like, the first 2 stories, but the 3rd one. And he remembers when he was younger seeing it on TV and just being like, man, that 3rd one got me. So I can see that. I can imagine a young Carlin seeing the Zuni doll in the 3rd story and being pretty afraid of it. But we will get to that as I go through each of the stories. And I'm going to rate each story on their own. And then I'll just do like an overall rating for the movie in general. So apparently the Zuni doll itself was actually really hard to film with because random parts would fall off while they were trying to, puppeteer it. So I can imagine it looks kind of fragile with the way that it presents on screen. So, with puppetry, you always, when you're reading up on films with puppetry, you always see these types of things. Like, it was tough to deal with these. So let's get into the first story, Julie. And each story is a woman's name. And at the very end, I have something to kind of say, like an overall theme for all of them, bringing it all together. So Julie is the first one. Wow, Chad and his buddy are dogs. But that wasn't uncommon back then at that point. That's when Chad's talking in the beginning on the college campus, to his buddy, who I don't even remember his name. He wasn't that important. It was just like, look at that chick. Oh, man, they're dogs. Oh, they don't look good. And then he sees Julie, his professor, and is like, ooh, very attracted. Now, obviously, that line and him, them focusing on him really noticing her and kind of saying that he doesn't really fully understand why, that comes into play much later. But then he's fixated, obviously. He's sitting in class. He's having this daydream, which I was kind of like, is this When I first saw it, I'm like, is this Chad's daydream of what he wants to do with her? Or is this something that he did already? Or is this kind of like a premonition of what'll happen? Because when we eventually get there and she's been roofied at the drive-in, it plays out exactly like his daydream. Now, I don't know if that was just done out of convenience for the film purpose, or if it was done intentionally, like he was having this premonition that that's what he's going to do, and that somehow it was like this power that Julie was using to put that into his head to make him do this stuff. Because obviously, by the end, we find out that she has a long history of kind of hooking these men in, playing with them until she's done, and then disposing of them, as she does. When Chad's sneaking around outside, you see where this is going. To a degree, you see where it's going. When he's sneaking around outside of Julie's place, at that point, they're going really hard at Chad being a real creeper. So much so that you really believe, or at least I did, that he's not going to be the main villain of the story. I mean, he is still a very strong villain of the story, obviously, because he's doing really disgusting things, including raping someone. So, yeah, he is obviously a villain, but he's not who's supposed to be the main villain of it. Obviously, we found out in the end that that's actually Julie, with that big twist of, oh, this was all cat and mouse, and Chad thought he was in control, but really Julie was in control the whole time. Because she was so unsuspecting. She looked so prim and proper and reserved and conservative, and she was a professor. You would never know. It plays to that whole thing where you never fully know a person. And there were a lot of films during this time that were kind of exploring that, of like, you think you know this person, but here's their dark side type thing. Which I'll talk about that at the very end. The shot of Chad standing in the dark outside of her house was really interesting because half of his face is lit and the other half is totally dark. Now, I'm wondering if that was supposed to be a visual representation of who he is as a person, that he's half good, half evil at that point, or potentially a representation of him sitting there debating whether he should go through with things. And there's the dark side and there's the light side, kind of having that struggle as he just kind of stands there. But I like the shot. It looks striking. And in general, the directing for this film, all three of the stories, was quite good. Didn't take much convincing for Chad to get his date. That was one of the indicators that maybe something else is going on with Julie at this point, because she kind of puts up the smallest of fights with him. And he's just like, oh, I don't know. I don't think I should. I'm not really supposed to. And then she's like, okay, though, let's go. So that's your first indicator. Side note, I love seeing drive-ins in film. I am a fan of going to drive-ins. There's actually a really good one not too far away from where I live, and I've been to it numerous times. It's always so fun. So whenever I see drive-ins, especially, from that time period, from the 70s, 80s, whatever, it's just so fun. It's awesome to see. Love it. With how strong they show Chad as terrible, especially with the roofie scene, it gives the idea that Julie actually is the true danger. Because if you're watching this from a horror film perspective, you know it's never going to be that straightforward. It's never going to be that straightforward. They're not just going to, well, I guess not never, but most of the time. So, especially with these small vignettes of stories. So I started suspecting pretty early that it wasn't really Chad that was the problem, because they were, pointing at him so heavily. And then the roofie scene happened. I'm just like, oh, I mean, there's no way that this is gonna, continue with just Chad being the danger. Chad saying Julie wouldn't be believed if she went to the cops actually seems pretty legitimate for that time, unfortunately. Society has changed a lot, but with these films, you kind of get a glimpse into a time capsule of how society was. And unfortunately, he was right, most likely, that if she went to the authorities and was like, this is what actually happened, they were probably going to believe Chad over her. It's the way it was. And actually, in certain instances, the way it still is, unfortunately. Wouldn't other students become suspicious of Chad since he took up the book with the note tucked in it to Julie's desk? They see Julie read it, everyone in the class sees her read it, and then she immediately dismisses class. And no one, sees this as suspicious or anything. They just kind of are like, okay, out of class. I mean, I guess you could say that's a college student. They're more concerned about, going and getting a nap in between classes or having extra free time to do whatever than they are like trying to figure out what's happening there. But it just seemed like too suspicious because Chad didn't even like sneakily pass her a note. He literally like had it sticking way out of the book. Everyone sees him go up because it was while she was talking, and then she immediately picks it up, reads it in front of the class, and is just like, oh, class is dismissed. Like, you would think that someone would be like, is everything okay? Just saying. Solid twist when Julie reveals her actual position of power when she has drugged Chad, and she turns it around and is just like, you know, I'm done. I'm bored with you at this point. That's when you're kind of like, oh, what is really going on? You know, has she done this before? Obviously, we found out she has because they have that really nice scene at the end where she's putting the clipping from the newspaper in her scrapbook where she keeps all her other victims' newspaper clippings, showing that she's a serial killer. She's done this before. She lures men in, and it kind of seemed to me like she had like an actual like power, like some sort of supernatural power. And that's why I think in the beginning Chad like was so attracted to her when she walked by outside, and he didn't know why. He was just like, I just feel like I have to see her naked. So I feel like that may have been what was really going on. But I like the turn of her drugging him. I like the turn of her, you know, taking him into his photography room and lighting it on fire. And that shot, I love that shot of showing Julie through the giant flame that's coming up when she was like, Chad, I told you about these chemicals. Be careful, they're flammable. And then just lights it up. So it was pretty good. Also a good segment to show her putting the article in scrapbook. I already talked about that. And then the introduction. It's one of those days. Introduction of Arthur. He's the setup for the next victim. It is the indicator that the story continues. She will continue to kill, and there's really no end in sight. She will keep adding to that scrapbook. So I do like the way it ends. Julie acting the way she does and giving in so much kind of would indicate a script kind of written from the male perspective. With all these stories, I think in general, you can kind of see that it seems very male perspective written because the female characters don't really have depth. Like, they really don't. Like, they may have two sides, which I think is an overall theme for these, but they don't have depth. They're not, like, rich, interesting characters. And I guess, you know, most people could probably argue could potentially just be because these are shorts. You know, each one's, around, like, 20 minutes or so. So, a little bit more than that. This speaks to a young man's obsession with getting it on with his teacher. That is an age-old thing. People for decades have been like, oh man, I got this hot teacher, I want to get with my teacher. So they're taking that and making it a morality tale of basically, this is what happens when you have this temptation, when you sin like this is what can happen. There's so many stories over centuries, not just within film, but within, you know, written stories and verbal stories that kind of cover that type of stuff. So my overall rating for the segment Julie out of 5 stars with half stars in play is 3. A very solid 3-star rating. I thought it was pretty solid. Now let's go to the next one. I didn't like this one nearly as much. Milcent and Terese. The opening sequence shows a deep hatred that Milcent has for her sister Terese. Obviously, in the end, we find out Terese is Milcent. They are the same person. And honestly, I suspected this from the get-go, based off of the comment that when that guy Ammon shows up, which is his last name, when he shows up very early on, she makes a comment about, crazy how different me and my sister look. And I was like, why would they even have that? And then I was like, most likely it's trying to kind of like throw people off to make you actually think that they look different, to make you not think as much that they might be the same person. But that kind of like was fishy to me. And I was like, yeah, they're probably the same person. So I got it pretty early on. When Milcent tells the story of Teresa's evil to Mr. Ammon, you wonder if it's actually true or not. Because she does seem like kind of off the rails at that point. Like she's just like seething and just has an irrational level of hatred for her sister. The way she tells it, there's actually like a darkness in her voice as well. And that goes to Karen Black's acting, which like I said, she did a really good job throughout. There's just this bit of like a something dark, something sinister in the way she delivers her lines when she's talking to Ammon. Well, in general, just within that story in particular. Mr. Ammon just starting to cry is a good way to show his admittance of his corruption at the influence of Terese. That's when, Millicent is like berating him, saying, "You've done terrible things, you've been corrupted, you've been sinning, and it's all because of her." And instead of like really responding to it, he just kind of like starts to break down. And that I like that from a filmmaking standpoint, because it just shows like you don't always have to use dialogue to deliver a message. To show things, don't necessarily say things. And that's something that is talked about in the writing realm a lot, about show don't tell. It's just a much better way to do it, because you don't want to treat the audience like they're dumb. When Millicent calls the doctor, it definitely tips the scale toward her having a psychological issue, and potentially even being Therese herself. And note how vague that Ramsey's dialogue is. Ramsey's dialogue is so vague, and you can tell it's so intentionally vague, that they're trying not to tip the real relationship, the hand of the real relationship that's going on there. So that even further put me in the camp of Millicent and Terese are the same person. Because I was like, why is she calling a doctor who looks much older, and they're talking in such vague terminology? I'm like, she is the person. Like, she's his patient, and she has a split personality, which is what it was. And, in the end, Ramsey says, this is the most extreme case of split personality I've ever seen. So, by the way, George Gaines plays Dr. Ramsey, and people may know him. I know him most from the show Punky Brewster as the father of Punky, and you may know him also from Police Academy, the Police Academy films. So, but he was in a lot of stuff. You can look him up on IMDb. The jump from Terese banging on the door and Millicent writing in her journal is supposed to appear as a look to the other side of the door at that point in time, when actually it's a jump in time. So the way it's shot, it's, Terese banging on the door yelling at Millicent, and you think, oh, Millicent's behind the door, and then they cut to Millicent sitting in a chair. You assume it's in that room writing the journal while Terese is yelling at her. But notice, you don't hear Terese yelling in the background. So it's actually a jump in time. And now Millicent is dressed as Millicent, her personality Millicent, and she's reacting to what Terese did. So I thought that was interesting. I think it's a clue to what's actually going on, that Millicent is using voodoo to get rid of Terese. When she told Eamon that that's the type of stuff that Terese was into. Remember, when Eamon was there, she starts pointing at all these books, and she's like, you know who she is. You know what she really is. She's a demon. And she starts pointing out, like, witchcraft, voodoo, and all these books. And she's like, that's what she's into. That's what she does. And then later on, she's trying to get rid of Terese. And what's she doing? She's building a voodoo doll. So I think that's a little clue for the audience of, she was saying that that's what Terese does, and that's what she's doing currently. So, yeah, just thought of that. The reveal is especially because she only killed herself. Like, there was really no danger at any point for anyone in the story, just she killed herself. So, like, it's not high stakes. It's not really that interesting. I saw it coming a mile away. I'm sure a lot of people saw it coming a mile away. And it just kind of like, it ends with just this blah, especially if you already know what's going on. There were plenty of movies exploring psychological disorders during this time, and they were almost always associated with evil and destruction. There typically were not films about someone has a psychological issue or disorder, and they're a person just struggling, and they're a person too. It was always during this time period, there's a person with a psychological issue, and that makes them dangerous. And I think that's a bad thing that's kind of further stigmatized psychological disorders in our society. Because film, really does have sway and stuff like that. If it just gets beaten into people's minds so much, like it did back in this time period, it's not good, long term. But people don't really know any better at that point, and that's why society progresses We find out more, and now we're treating things better in film for the most part. So, Millicent and Terese, I'm just gonna give that 2 stars. I didn't think it was that great. Meh, real blah. So let's move on to the final one. Definitely the best one, the most interesting, the most fun, definitely. Amelia. As soon as you see how menacing the Zuni doll itself looks, and then Amelia reads, "He who kills," you just know it's bad news. Like, you know where this is going. You know that this is going to come to life. You know that there's going to be a fight between Amelia and this freaking doll, and you're waiting for it. Now, that's one of the biggest problems with this story. You're waiting for it. There is definitely not great pacing in this, and they definitely make you wait way too long for things to actually really get going between her and the doll. But once it gets going, it's a lot of fun. I really love that part of it. Definitely my favorite part of the entire Trilogy of Terror. With how long Amelia's talk on the phone with her mother is, you wonder if this is filler or will it actually end up being important. Most of it's actually not, though, but then she explains all the backstory of the doll. Now, obviously, she needs to speak to her mother at some point. They probably should have made it more brief, but because that sets up the very ending where she's calling to have her mother come there because she's, basically lying in wait. But I'll talk more about that later. Amelia does say she likes being alone, but she'll regret that. And I'm sure a lot of people see that coming when they're watching this. Oh, and by the way, to backtrack, I like the backstory that she tells about the doll. Like, every bit of information just getting absorbed by the audience members just adds to more danger level in their mind. They're just like, oh, this is bad. Oh, this is sounding worse. This is sounding even worse. She's in for it. She's in for it now. And this thing is like superhuman strength because obviously when it's alive, it opens a door. It like has enough strength and weight that it actually is able to turn a doorknob. Well, first jump up to the doorknob and turn it and open the door. It's crazy. Once the necklace falls off of the doll, you start to get excited. At least I did. But you still have to wait, which was my big problem with this. You still have to keep waiting because they don't get into it fast enough. They do an okay job keeping some tension as Amelia looks around her place looking for the doll. The big payoff, though, is the jump scare of the doll coming after her ankles. I like that. That actually did get me because there hadn't really been jump scares in the movie prior. It was more effective. Like that's one of the things I really like that when films do. Just give me like one jump scare or just give me like a very small amount of jump scares. Don't give me the expectation that there will be jump scares within the film because when you keep doing them and keep doing them and keep doing them, you just start to expect them. So it's just more impact when there aren't jump scares and then there's a jump scare. You're just not expecting it. You're not ready. And so I like how they did this. The noises that the Zuni doll makes are funny, but they're also effective because they sound like crazed and maniacal and evil. So it was great. Also, the POV shots, those point of view shots that they have for the Zuni doll, and especially how they're like at the right height level and they move so fast. It's A, cool looking. B, makes it seem like a huge threat because it can move so fast. Like, you see that it leaves very little reaction time for Amelia when she's fighting it. Trying to drown a wooden statue. Not so smart, are you, Amelia? When she was doing that, I was like, okay, like, you have it wrapped up. Like, throw it out the window. I believe there was a window. I mean, I'm sure there was a window within her bathroom. And even if there wasn't, she could have gotten into a window. Just throw it out. Someone else's problem. This is, whatever. But no, she tries to drown a wooden statue. Doesn't make sense. I dig the shot of the doll trying to saw itself out of the suitcase. That was cool when she traps in the suitcase and you see like the knife coming up through it and it's like sawing to try and get out and then she's fighting with it like trying to grab it. But then here's the problem. Did she not learn her lesson from before with the whole trying to drown the doll thing? She opens the suitcase. It stops moving. It's playing possum, obviously. She opens the suitcase. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think you killed it? Because she was like, she got a knife and she was stabbing it. Do you think, like, it's imbued, you even said yourself, it's imbued with the spirit of a hunter. You can't stab a spirit and kill it. Like, the wooden thing doesn't take damage, really. Like, it can be nicked here and there, but you can't really kill it with a knife. So she's just not very smart when it comes to how she's fighting this thing. Ugh. Did she really think she killed it? I just thought she was too stupid to come out on top in this one because of all these stupid things she was doing. And I was right. She did not come out on top. She was bested. Love the sequence with the doll burning in the oven, especially with the addition of it screaming. That was awesome. Like, you're seeing the flames, you're seeing it like flailing around. It was awesome. But then our idiot protagonist, Amelia, opens the oven. Like, after not that much time. Like, you literally just went through the situation of it not moving anymore in the suitcase, opened it up, and it attacked you. Why would you fall for the same thing? That she did the exact same thing with the oven. This is what I'm saying. Too stupid to live. Way too stupid to live. Solid twist with the spirit jumping to Amelia's body. And the touch with the sharp teeth when she shows it. After she goes, she calls her mother. You see like some darkness around her eyes, indicating that something had happened. But at first you don't necessarily know that that means that she's possessed. But she's also speaking like she's not very lively, like she's a bit more monotone and almost zombie-like. And she has her mother come over, or tells her mother to come over, and then she's just lying in wait with the knife, and then she starts smiling, and you see the pointy teeth that the Zuni doll had. And that's a really cool visual indicator to show you exactly what happened there. Once again, show, don't tell. So I like how they did that. That was pretty cool. But once again, the pacing kind of sucks. The pacing sucks in this at first. Once it gets going, it's great, but the pacing is bad up until it gets going, and there's a lot of unnecessary dialogue, unfortunately. So out of 5 stars, I'm giving this 3.5, so not bad. Also, my kind of like wrapping everything up statement about all of these is that note that each story is about a woman, and they all have another side. It's about duality, basically. It's the woman that you think they are based off of how they look, and the woman they really are. Because in Julie, she looks like a very nice, prim and proper woman, but she's actually a serial killer. So, like, you know, light and dark. In Milcent and Terese, in the beginning, she looks, again, like a nice, like, prim and proper woman who's very concerned about her unruly sister, and you find out she actually is that person. So it's the light and the dark side of her, Millicent being the light and Terese being the dark. Then, and obviously in Amelia, it's a little bit different, but it's still there. You get the very nice Amelia, who's has a good relationship with her mother. She's dating this new guy, and then she ends up being possessed by the spirit of the hunter that was possessing the doll, the Zuni doll. So, duality, light and dark. I thought it was interesting that they all had that theme. So, it makes sense, right? So, I guess overall with 5 out of 5 stars with half stars in play. I mean, I think it settles in at a 3. It's good enough. I don't think that the Milcent and Terese brings it down too much. And I also don't think that the Amelia one brings it up too much. So, I'd just give it overall 3 stars. So, thanks, Frank, for pushing me to watch this one because it was fun. I enjoyed it, especially the Zuni doll. And I believe the Zuni doll shows up again in the second Trilogy of Terror. Because, yes, they did do another Trilogy of Terror. So, maybe I need to get to that at some point and review it. We'll see. But anyway, I would love to know everyone else's thoughts on this movie. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Like it, hate it, in between. Let's talk about it. Also, did you see it when you were young, and what was your reaction to it? Were you scared? Did you think it was funny? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let's talk. Also, we can just talk about horror in general. Do me a quick favor, though. If you have not, hit subscribe. That is your best way to repay me if you like this video or any video I've ever done. Please do that. Every time I get a new subscriber, I get an email, and I see who it is, and I look at that, and I say, that is awesome. Thank you to this person. It just feels really good to know that people, you know, are subscribing because it indicates that they think the material is worth their time. And that is a humbling thing. Like, it really does humble me personally. So I appreciate it when people do subscribe. So also hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing at least 4 a week typically. and I think that's a good amount. But regardless, thank you very much for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.